On today's episode of MR Triton, long range fuel tanks. So I've created this video as part of a new category video that I'm making, which is part comparison. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and look at a number of different parts and a number of different brands that supply those parts, work out your best value for money and pros and cons of each item. So let's talk long range fuel tanks. Why do you need a long range fuel tank? Well, it basically enables you to drive for a longer period of time without refueling your vehicle. Now, why might you need to do that? If you're just your typical suit in ute kind of person who drives their vehicle to work each day, goes camping on the weekends every now and then, it's possible that you wouldn't necessarily have a requirement or a need for a long range fuel tank. However, if you're an avid full driver, outback tourer, live on a cattle station, you travel highway a lot, and don't have ready access to fuel all the time, long range fuel tanks are for you. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily do a whole bunch of outback touring, but I'll buy a long range fuel tank because why not? When I do those highway Ks, fill up your fuel tanks in town while it's a little bit cheaper, hit the highway, get to those outback towns where fuel's a little bit more expensive, you don't have to fuel up in those more expensive places. That said, that's more of a here and now benefit. You do have the upfront cost of in excess of $1,000 for your long range fuel tank. So don't think that you're going to save money by buying one of these unless you use the vehicle for many, many years, because you're going to be waiting a long time to get your return on investment. It's one of those cool things or cool, must-have things for when you do a full drive. You want a long-range fuel tank. It's awesome to double your fuel capacity of your vehicle. I love the idea of it. It sounds bloody cool. So without further ado, let's get stuck into what I believe to be the top 3 contenders. And of those 3, we'll work out which one is the best one on the market. Now, long-range fuel tanks primarily come in 2 different types of material. You've got your plastics and you've got your steels. Now, a lot of those steels are aluminized, basically to prevent rust. Generally, they're around 2 millimeters thick. Now, the plastic polymer tanks are generally from around 7 to 10 mil thick in various places. Obviously, they pour and cast the plastic tanks, so you're going to get variations in thickness of the tank. 70 liters for me, mostly stock MR Triton, all the running gear stock, tires, no bull bar, etc. I generally get around 550 to 650 kilometers of a tank. And that depends, because if you're off-road, you're using low range, you're going to use fuel a fair bit quicker in the sand. If you're just doing highway driving, generally it's around that 550 to 650 kilometer range. That said, where we are putting in a long range fuel tank and you duplicate that fuel capacity, you're going to get in excess of around 1,300 kilometers, which is impressive. That's a long way to drive. That's most of the way to your trip and most of the way back. If you're doing anything weekend, you might not need to refuel at all. And if you're doing those outback trips like Goulds Track, that'll do pretty much the whole trip on a tank and a bit. None of the long range fuel tanks actually double the capacity of the vehicle. But there's one contender that comes very close, that being the Brown Davis long range fuel tank. The Brown Davis long range fuel tank is a straight replacement for the stock fuel tank. It's 2 millimeter thick aluminized steel and it provides a capacity of 138 liters of fuel. That's a 98% increase on the stock fuel capacity, which is as good as you could ask for. It's essentially 100% of your stock capacity. I guess one of my focuses with bar work at the moment, as you'll find in my following vehicles, is that I have a preference for Australian made and owned and designed parts. Generally they're more expensive, but there's a less prevalence of build quality issues. Not to say that products made in Thailand or overseas are low quality, because they're not. They're still great products that do what you want them to. But if you put an ARB bull bar next to it and an overseas made bull bar, such as MCC or whatever, you're going to notice that there is going to be differences in the quality of manufacture. They'll do the same stuff. They look different. Maybe the ones made overseas look better in your opinion. That's what I think in most cases. But there's still not that same tier of quality. Why am I saying this? The Brown Davis long range fuel tank is Australian made and owned, and that's a big tick in my book. That's something for me that I would consider when buying it. I would rather spend the extra $200 or so on that product because I know that it's made here, supports local jobs. In terms of pure product performance, so the retail price of a Brown Davis long range fuel tank is $1,095. Now, that's not actually that expensive. That's just the part itself. No roadworthy certificates, no installation costs. But if you got a weekend free, maybe you get a mate over to help you grab a beer, drain the stock fuel tank, remove it, connect up the Brown Davis tank. It's a 3 to 4 hour job. Now, in saying that it's 138 litres and 98% replacement for a 70 litre stock fuel tank, you're only able to use 132 litres because there's that bit of fuel that sits in the bottom that the pump can't quite suck up. That's not necessarily a con in my eyes. 132 litres is still fantastic from 70 litres. That's still basically your stock capacity doubled. And also, I don't think there's really going to be a situation where when you've got a long range fuel tank that you're going to let it get down to that point unless you're utterly desperate. Now, let's just say I go camping on a long trip. I've got a long range fuel tank. I would still bring a 20 litre diesel jerry can with me because you don't know whether you're going to pierce that fuel tank in some way. Who knows what's going to happen? Not to say long range fuel tanks are weak, because they're not. They're very strong. They're made for this sort of work. But in the unlikely event that that does happen, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to plug up any hole in your fuel tank, and then you've got no fuel left. It's always still advisable to bring that 20 litre jerry can because you're still going to get a decent amount of range out of that can, and that might be the difference between you getting home or you having to spend a couple of nights in the bush or you having to use an EPIRB. Now, there's another very popular long range fuel tank on the market, that being the Ironman long range fuel tank. Ironman being manufactured of 2mm thick aluminized steel, providing a new capacity of 125 litres of fuel. That's a replacement for the 70 litres currently on the vehicle from factory. So it's not quite a 100% increase in capacity. In fact, it's only 78% increase in capacity. That's 125 litres. Nowhere does it specify the usable literage, so one would anticipate or assume that 125 litres of fuel is what you're going to get out of this tank when you're driving the vehicle. Retail price of the Ironman long range fuel tank is $1,026. I know, another weirdly specific number. Now look at the price difference between the Brown Davis and the Ironman tank. You got $1,095 and you got $1,026. Now for the sake of the extra, I don't know, $70, I would probably lean towards getting the Brown Davis one. A, it's Australian made, designed and owned, and B, you get basically a 100% increase in your existing stock factory fuel capacity. Now moving on to the big dog in Australian 4x4 accessory market, ARB. ARB is Australian made and owned. We all know them, we all love them. Anyone who looks at full driving or getting into full driving comes across ARB or TJM. ARB do something a little bit different when it comes to long range fuel tanks. Their long range fuel tank is made from polymer or plastic. Let's just say that you're building a big chunky 79 series Dream Tourer that everyone seems to have these days, but for some reason I can't afford. They're a very heavy vehicle when you load them up. Let's just say you put that steel canopy on the back, you get your big 33s or 34s or even 35s, big lift kit, big bar work, and then you go slap a steel long range fuel tank, doubling the weight of your fuel cargo. That's going to be a very heavy vehicle. Now, when weight counts is when you're looking at things like your GBM. If you can get away with putting a plastic long range fuel tank underneath the vehicle, providing just about double the fuel capacity from factory, and it weighs significantly less than the steel tank, that plastic tank is going to look awfully appealing. I think so. But unfortunately, the long range fuel tank that ARB provides for the MR Triton is only 120 litres. Now that is the smallest long range fuel tank that I've been able to identify on the market currently, 120 litres. So stock fuel tank is 70 litres. Doubling that would be 140 litres, and ARB provides you with 120 litres. So what you're getting is a 71% increase in your stock fuel cargo. That's still not a discouraging factor that would prevent me from buying an ARB long range fuel tank. I'm a little bit old school in that I tend to think that I like things made of steel more than I like things made of plastic. Now, I don't have a big truck. I don't have an F-250 or a 70 series Land Cruiser. I've got an MR Triton like most of us do. It's fantastic at carrying weight in the back of the vehicle. In fact, it prefers having weight in the back of the vehicle. It handles better. So I still wouldn't be discouraged from getting one of the steel long range fuel tanks. Now the ARB long range fuel tank retails for a price of $1,295, which isn't too expensive when you compare it to other objects on the market that you can buy for your vehicle that modify it for better off-road performance. But it's still $200 more expensive than the Brown Davis long range fuel tank. So ARB, Australian owned, Australian designed and Australian made, which is another big positive for the item that we're looking at today. But it doesn't mean that you have to buy something just because it's made in Australia. Ironman have their products made overseas and they're still fantastic products. In fact, I think, without going into too much detail, Ironman bull bars are one of the most, if not the most, good looking bull bar on the market. So with the MR Triton long range fuel tanks, you'll find a common trend. The long range fuel tanks that are available for the MR Triton aren't that expensive. Variation from $1,026 to $1,295. That's not actually that expensive. Most of us out here could get that within one paycheck. and pay all our bills as well. It's not a discouraging price. And I think that's why a lot of people get them, because it's not, if it was a $3,000 item, if it was a $2,000 item for your vehicle and you're not going to do a whole lot of serious off-roading, you might go, I'll just put that money into something to make my weekend camping more comfortable. But if it was something that's not that expensive, well, it's not discouraging to go buy it. Now, the fourth long-range fuel tank on the market currently is the Long Ranger fuel tank. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find any information readily available regarding the pricing of a Long Ranger fuel tank. I would suspect it'd be around that $1,000 and something mark, most likely. It's a 125 litre long-range fuel tank made from 2mm thick aluminized steel, just like the other steel long-range fuel tanks. It was the only one, however, that I could find the weight of the long-range fuel tank empty being 41 kilograms. 41 kilos is a small child. Now, you fill that up with fuel, you're going to increase the weight that you're carrying significantly. If you're doubling your fuel capacity from 70 litres to 125 litres, that's 78% fuel cargo increase. So it's not that heavy. So you can all sort of see in this summary here who the winner might be. You got Brown Davis with a 98.56% fuel capacity increase. That's 138 litres with 132 usable litres of fuel, $1,095, made in Australia, straight replacement for the stock fuel tank. ARD 120 litre, 71% increase from the stock fuel capacity, made from polymer varying from 9mm thick to 7mm thick. So decent strength in that item. Don't think it's weak just because it's made of plastic. Made in Australia, and again, replacement for a stock fuel tank. And then you've got Ironman 128 litre, 78.57% increase from factory fuel capacity, $1,026, steel, 2mm thick aluminized. Not sure of the country of manufacture, definitely Australian, designed and owned, and a replacement for the stock fuel tank. I put emphasis on the fact that they're a straight replacement for the stock fuel tank because my mate's R51 Pathfinder looked to get a replacement for a stock fuel tank. Long range fuel tanks for them come in the form of a secondary fuel tank as opposed to replacing the stock fuel tank. They're ridiculously overpriced. If you want to laugh, look at how expensive aftermarket mods are for an R51 Pathfinder and you will piss yourself. Hilarious. So in conclusion, what are we getting at here? So the summary here is obvious for me who that winner is in the long range fuel tank market. It's Brown Davis. Very reasonably priced, made from a strong, durable, proven material, 98% increase from your stock fuel capacity, Australian made, designed and owned. It's the clear winner in my eyes. And they do a number of different awesome products for your vehicle, such as underbody armor, underbody protection, these long full length vehicle bash plates as well, which addresses one of the MR Triton's weaknesses, which I've discussed in my MR Triton off-road weaknesses video. Check it out. The exposed underbelly, my dented fuel tank. The Brown Davis fuel tank will obviously mitigate some of that risk because it's a 2mm thick steel tank, a lot stronger than this, whatever it is that I've got under my car now. If you buy the additional products as well of the underbody protection, you're addressing that concern and you're gonna have a much more capable off-road vehicle as well. So thanks for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what long range fuel tank you bought. Let me know what price you got it for. Whether you think it's increased your vehicle's performance off-road. Do you think it was a bit of a waste of money? Or do you just love it in your day-to-day life? Even if you use your car for commuting, not having to fill up your car as often. In fact, having to fill up your car half as often. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.